Kenneth Grahame's The Wind in the Willows has been around with us for many years now and has had many adaptations by movie, theatre or television. There's one particular production that I regard as the highest of quality and content, and that is the Cosgrove Hall version. It centres around a shy mole, a practical water-obsessed rat, a curmudgeonly but good-hearted badger who's a bit of an introvert, and a clinically insane amphibian. Fortunately, it seems, my favourite version of The Wind in the Willows seems to be the overall favourite of most of the British public. It was made by Cosgrove Hall Productions in Manchester during the 1980s. The same animation company who brought us Danger Mouse, Count Duckula and the original BFG movie. Possibly the biggest reason I love this show, apart from its lovely stop-motion animation and its unbeatable voice cast, is the genius writing of Brian Truman. Truman wrote for most of the Cosgrove Hall shows during the 80s, and any Danger Mouse fans will know how off-the-wall and random his writing can be.
Oh, you rotter!
What?
Danger Mouse will sort you out, you rude Richie, rice pudding.
Rice? Pudding?
Can I start again with the letter B?
You can be silent!
But I like the letter B. It's like a little fat man with a big tummy.
Whilst the writing in Wind in the Willows couldn't be as zany as Danger Mouse's, seeing as it was like a sequel adaptation of Grahame's novel and not an original project, Truman did his best to make it as witty as possible, especially that exasperating and idiotic Toad of Toad Hall.
I just out for a bit of a run, you know, keeping fit. We natural athletes must keep in trim, eh, what? I suppose you wouldn't have the odd cream cake, Ratty. I am feeling awfully peckish.
I've stopped making them, Toad.
Stopped making them?
Too fattening. We natural athletes have to keep in trim, you know.
Truman even had the ability to make the villainous weasels very amusing to watch at times too.
Not being much that. Chief, how big can a mushroom get?
What are you on about, you half-wit?
How big can a mushroom get?
I've told you about talking rubbish.
In the original 1983 movie, that was an adaptation of Kenneth Grahame's original novel and actually started the whole show off, the weasels were very sinister, even more so than the novel depicted. I'm sure everyone knows the original story of The Wind in the Willows, but I'll just do a quick recap. It's a bit of a slow starter that eventually develops into something a bit more action-packed. One spring set in Edwardian England, Mole, fed up with spring cleaning, goes for a walk and meets Ratty by the riverbank. They have a picnic, and Ratty introduces Mole to his friend Mr. Toad. Without hardly any introduction to Mole, Toad shows them his new canary-coloured cart that he intends to travel all around the country with. After a few days travelling, a car sends the caravan into a ditch, and Toad has a new obsession: motor cars.
That is the only way to travel. Woohoo! Here today, in next week tomorrow. Boop, boop.
Now, Toad.
Boop, 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 boop.
Clearly too deluded to care about money or broken bones, Toad smashes car after car. Ratty and Mole get Toad's late father's friend Badger to try and stop Toad from any more financial ruin, but the motoring bug has hold of him too much that all their plans fail and he ends up stealing the car. After being sentenced to 20 years in jail,
19 years? 19 years?
And another year for being green. 20 years.
the jailer's daughter helps Toad escape by wearing her auntie's washerwoman's uniform. After bagging a free ride on a train and escaping from a dramatic police pursuit, Toad arrives back at the riverbank to find his home took over by the weasels.
Badger, I shall never see my dear old home again. It's lost. Lost forever.
Lost nonsense. I have a plan.
With the help of his friends, they fight the weasels and get his house back.
Mr.
Although this film is thoroughly nostalgic for me and has some really great songs, it can be a bit dull in some places and very creepy in others. Overall, I much prefer the subsequent TV show. Now some of you may be thinking, well, why do you have a copy of the original novel if you're more interested in the TV show stories? I don't know.
Gotta stay true to the original source material, innit? Word.
If you ever wanted to get your kid into Winning the Willows, or even an adult, I recommend showing them a TV episode first. It's a shame that the complete collection DVDs are no longer available, and the only DVDs you can find in shops now in the UK are the original movie and Winter Tales. Bummer, dude. But as I mentioned earlier, I believe the reason I rate Cosgrove Hall's Willows so much is because of Brian Trueman's writing. I've loved Winning the Willows since as long as I can remember, and a lot of my school friends didn't. They thought of it as still too slow and non-action packed. However, I think as you get older, it becomes more humorous, as the humour in it isn't really played down for young kids, and a lot of the jokes would go over a 5-year-old's head.
My dear Red, I have to pack a few simple provisions for the journey.
But you'll only be up for about an hour.
An hour? Woo! I didn't think it would be that long.
Oh, Toad, come on.
No, not likely. I might starve to death. No, it's all right. I'll just go and get a few more sandwiches. Yes, and of course a cake or two. I'll need a few packets of biscuits. Tin or two of soup.
We've done it! We've done it! We won the cup!
Oh, that's not fair. He ran faster than I did.
However, I've always liked it since I was a very young age, and would watch episodes and the movie constantly on VHS.
Yes, alright, I'm coming.
Oh!
The Wind in the Willows has been adapted many times, more than it should have been really. But I guess producers just love Toad and his pals too much. There are definitely some very bad adaptations, like the very first one from Disney in 1949. Seriously, who is this Winky Pillock? I'd call him something a little similar to Winky. The word has an A in it and ends in ER, but kids might be watching, or just someone who likes to moan about bad language.
Get him, you bloke! Get him!
Absolutely idiotic.
Most of the adaptations were animated in 2D animation, and a couple of live-action movies were made. Every adaptation had a well-ensembled cast, with lots of famous, well at least famous at the time, actors, performing the voices of the 4 famous friends. A lot of people growing up in the 90s loved the TVC version, which had Rick Mayall as Toad, Michael Palin as Ratty, Alan Bennett as Mole, and Michael Albus Dumbledore Gambon as Badger. Personally, I found the character designs in this version nowhere near as good as Cosgrove Hall's, but I'm really just nitpicking here, as the animation in this version is of a supreme quality. I guess I just prefer Mole and Badger to wear glasses, and I think Toad looks far too green here. I mean, he looks more like a plump frog than an actual toad. I think a lot of die-hard Rick Mayall fans would choose this version as their favourite, purely on the biased opinion that Rick Mayall is voicing Toad. Although Rick gave it his all, and even won an award for his vocal performance in this version, for me, he is way too shouty and over-the-top aggressive.
Hello, you fellows! You're just in time!
Ah, hello, you fellows. You're just in time to come for a jolly spin.
Bliss.
Although, to be fair, Mayall can be humorous when he delivers some of his lines in these movies.
Oh, bah! It's a dud. Oh, order me another one.
Got to have patience, Mr. Toad.
Patience? I am the most patient fellow in England.
One thing I will credit TVC for is that they are the only company to adapt The Wind in the Willows, apart from Cosgrove Hall, who made a sequel set after the original novel. TVC adapted William Horwood's Willows in Winter, and whilst it was a faithful adaptation of the book, I find Toad way too much of a dick in this story. I mean, he lets Ratty fall out of a plane without even caring that much. This little bit is left out of the cartoon movie, but in the Willows in Winter novel, the author mentions that Toad switches off the plane's engine on purpose to get Rat to panic and jump out of the plane. Jesus! I know Toad was always a selfish brat, but that's just going way too far. So sorry to all you Rick Mayall fans out there, but given the choice between Rick Mayall's Toad and David Jason's Toad, David Jason's version wins hands down, no contest.
Lovely jubbly.
I'm just too intelligent, that's my problem.
Around the same time the Cosgrove Hall version was being produced, over in the States, American animation company Rankin Bass decided to envision a slice of riverbank life as well. Although the US accents don't suit the characters at all, this version has quite a few catchy songs in its soundtrack.
My whole world floats when I'm messing around. When I'm messing around. When I'm messing around in boats.
The Cosgrove Hall version was a big success when it was shipped to the States. In fact, it was picked up by the Disney Channel, and for a UK product to be shown by Disney was a big deal. So naturally the show gained a lot of international fans too.
I love winning the windows because it teaches kids that even in a beautiful English village like that, people are still arseholes and they try to con you and nick your house.
My second favourite version of Willows is actually a live-action version adapted by and starring Monty Python star Terry Jones. Jones played Toad whilst fellow Python star Eric Idle played Ratty, with Steve Coogan as Mole and Nicole Williamson as Badger. Anthony Sher does a fantastic job as the evil but in this version quite sophisticated Chief Weasel, with Robert Bathurst equally terrific as the Weasel henchman. The songs in this are great too.
It's a secret of survival in a very nasty world. We were born on the same riverbank. What's mine is yours is his. Place where the willows dip into the water. We get along like cheese and mortar.
Although this film strays far from the original source material like Disney's does, I feel that this film still has good comedy, great songs and quite a good cast too. Michael Palin also appears in this version as a talking son. Other random things happening in this Python-esque movie are a talking clock belonging to Mole, Mr. Toad's solicitor played by John Cleese, who demands his client be punished severely instead of trying to defend him.
Much of a defence, is it? Not much, Brad, no, but the best that can be done in the circumstances. See the very word guilty indelibly imprinted upon his brow.
Another cameo from Stephen Fry as the magistrate, and the Chief Weasel hoping to blow up Toad Hall and building dog food factories. It's good fun for families who want a movie more about Toad's crazy antics instead of picnics by the river. Another live-action version was made by the BBC in 2006. This version was a lot closer to the original novel, and starred Matt Lucas from Little Britain as Toad,
Hello, Toad.
Lee Ingleby as Mole, Mark Gatiss as Rat, and Bob Hoskins as Badger. I feel the makeup in this live-action version isn't as good as Terry Jones's, and some parts that are meant to be humorous come across as very childish and sometimes pantomime-like.
Be off me, you unconscionable knave! Bankside pleb! Oh, look, a shark! Run that away!
It is quite humorous to see Bob Hoskins play Badger though, as seeing as he's shorter than all the other actors. Going back to Cosgrove Hall's version though, apart from the genius writing of Brian Truman, I love stop motion animation. Everything looks more detailed than when it's been drawn. The cars, bottles of champagne, cups of tea. No stone was unturned, and there's incredible detail in absolutely everything, even footprints and tyre marks made in the snow. I love Wallace and Gromit too. Nick Park does a wonderful job, but what does irk me though is how much praise Wallace and Gromit gets, when the amount of Wallace and Gromit films and projects is so minimal compared to The Wind in the Willows, especially this version. Willows had 65 episodes and 2 feature-length specials. Although now Shaun the Sheep has its own spin-off, I guess the Wallace and Gromit franchise is growing a lot more. Willows definitely deserves more credit. A Grand Day Out and The Wrong Trousers are shown on BBC One about 5 times every year. Willows hasn't even been shown on TV, well UK TV most certainly, since 1998. Like I mentioned earlier, it has a sophisticated sense of humour most of the time that if you don't really take in, it can go over your head, particularly when you're very young.
I never really liked that show, it was a bit too intellectual for me. I changed my mind. It's the best show I've ever seen.
Although the show has its fair share of slapstick comedy as well.
Oh, bother. I wonder where that one... Good heavens, he's dozed off as well. I hope he's all right for the match. Oh, here's my ball.
The voice cast in this version is 100% the best. David Jason not only voices Toad,
Shempa! Boofo! Oh!
but also the Chief Weasel.
Mind you, Mr. Toad does you quite nice, Isambard. Yeah, nearly had us fooled, he did.
But I am Isambard!
Yes, I know you are, that's right.
And Billy Rabbit.
Mr. Toad, I was walking along the canal bank and I was knocked into the water by a motor bicycle. I say. And my dad said I'll give that idiot from Toad Hall what for.
Oh, did he?
And then he saw the motor bicycle again, Mr. Toad, and it wasn't you at all, sir, riding it.
No, because
It was a
had the
weasel.
wretched things to...
Richard Pearson does a great job as Shine Mould.
It does sound a little ambitious, Toad.
Peter
Yes,
Sallis
well,
does a good
it's all
Ratty,
right now. I've repainted the wall.
as well as voicing Wallace.
Cracking toast, Gromit.
And Sir Michael Hordern gives his all as Gruff Badger.
Glorious creature.
Ian Carmichael, who voiced Rat in the movie,
I say, there's old Badger.
does a nice job as the narrator of the show.
In the countryside that spread from either bank of the calmly flowing river, the year's colours were growing as the year itself grew.
This version has something for everyone. All the chapters of the book were covered in the movie in the first series of the show, and there was lots of new funnier stories that didn't stray too far from the original source material. The only nitpick I do have with Brian Truman is that he wrote 3 different episodes centred around the same storyline, where the Weasels conned Toad by pretending to be stockbrokers one time, architects and railway solicitors, just by wearing posh clothes. Seriously, how can Toad not recognise the villains who have robbed him so many times? Is he seriously that stupid?
Drat and a double drat!
But overall, Cosgrove Hall's Winning the Willows will always be the #1 version for me. I hope anyone watching enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. This is Baz Banter 93 signing out. Boop boop.